my soul in self-control by liberty in love. Oh, beautiful creature that sees beyond the years, my alabaster cities, numbed in my human tears. America, America, God shed His grace on me, and crowned thy coat with brothers, from sea to shining sea. Okay, I want to welcome you guys for the 4th of July special on the 7th of July. Let's have you turn to Psalms 33:12. Psalm 33:12. Okay. In a moment, you get to see the slideshow that we have. Actually, I went to these places so you get to see it in person. Psalm 33:12. Oh, Willie, can you shut that door there? Okay. Okay, so afterwards we have a barbecue. You guys, everyone here is welcome. It's going to be on the other side, and it's going to be sausages. I think we have apple sausages, mango sausages, pineapple sausages, hot links, and potato salad, macaroni salad, coleslaw, and barbecue chips, um, cheddar chips, and regular salad. Okay, dessert will be ice cream bars, and there's soda. Okay, soda, there's too many to name. Okay, there's Coke, there's cherry Coke, there's uh, Dr. Pepper, things like that. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about, on the 4th of July, I'll talk about something patriotic. Today I'll be speaking on the Freedom Trail. How many here have been to Boston? Okay, how many here have been on the Freedom Trail? Have you been on the Freedom Trail? Okay, what did you see in Boston? Who else raised their hand on being in Boston? What did you see, Aaron? Ferry boat. So you went to maybe Martha's Vineyard? And what did you see in Boston, friend? You forgot, okay. So there we are. We saw so much in Boston. It's just like, how many have been to Disneyland? What do you see? Oh, I don't remember. But it was $200. Okay, so let's read Psalm 33. Psalm 33, verse number 12. It's not very long. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people whom he had chosen for his inheritance. Okay, so let's bow a word of prayer. Dear God, be with us as we hear this message. Honor the patriots. We want to thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. So America was born after the Revolutionary War, and so we'll just start off with a little history. In the year 1620, the King of England passed a law, and the law said that he was the head of the church. So there's a problem there, because you and I believe that Jesus is the church, not a human. So the king had many flaws. He was committing adultery, and there were lots of people who would not recognize the king as the head of the church, including the pilgrims. And basically, pilgrims told the king, you know what? Christ is the head of the church, not the king, because the king has problems. And of course, they got arrested, and they had a choice. The choice is you can stay in prison, or you can flee to another country. So they decided to sail for Massachusetts, and they landed at Plymouth. So I just want to say this. The problem is, if you go to England today, no one goes to church. And the reason no one goes to church is because the head of their church is an adulterer. Okay, as you probably know today, King Charles, you guys know who King Charles is, right? Okay, King Charles committed adultery when he was married to Princess Diana, and his brother is just as corrupt. His brother is a pedophile. So when you want to go to a church when he is the head of the church, and by the way, King Charles isn't even a Christian. He's not even saved. He says he believes in Buddhism. So now you can see why no one in England goes to church. But in America, the Pilgrims said, look, we're willing to sail across America, take our chances and die in that country if possible, so we can recognize Christ as the head of our church. And when the Pilgrims landed, there were 100. After the first year, 50% died. There were only 50 left, okay? So it was a big cost. So the king basically said, since I'm the head of the church, I'm almost equal to who Jesus Christ is, or I am God, just like the Pharaoh in Egypt, just like Caesar in Rome, just like Hirohito in Japan. And so let's fast forward to 1770. So let's go to the first slide. And can you turn off all the lights? So we fast forward to 1770. In 1770, we have a nation, America, that believes that Christ is the head of the church. However, England wanted to take over the United States. And so basically, we had to fight for our independence. The king back then was King George III. Okay, he was just as corrupt. Okay, so I will show you the original 13 colonies. The 13 colonies, I believe, start from New Hampshire. Count to see if I have all 13. Okay, so Ethan, ready? New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. How many do I have? 12. Okay, so Maine. Okay, 13. So back then, Vermont was not a state. In fact, back then, New York wanted Vermont, New Hampshire wanted Vermont, and wanted Vermont. So the compromise was this. Vermont says, we're not going to state. If you require we have to join, I'll join Canada. So they said, okay, you can be your own state. Okay, so I want you to focus on this. This area is Massachusetts. Next slide. Okay, so we have, when I went to New England, I was able to states in one day. I landed in Rhode Island. I drove these states are so small. It's like from here to Sacramento. I drove 2 hours to here. There's nothing to see. 2 hours to here, nothing to see. 2 hours to there, 2 hours to there, and then finally there. 24 hours, all 6 states. So if you want to play the game of doing all 50 states in your life, do this one in one day. Okay, so how many here have been to over 10 states in their life? Okay, well, let me just back off. How many here have been to over 6 states in their life? Okay, so if you haven't been to all 6 states in your life, you know what my recommendation is? Do these 6, okay? You got 6 in one day. We're going to focus on this area. There's Boston. Next slide. Okay, so here you have Massachusetts. Here's Boston. The Plymouth is right here. So the Pilgrims landed this way, first on Provincetown, and then they discovered that the soil was too rocky, so they established a colony, Plymouth, right there. We're not going to do this today. We're going to do that near Thanksgiving. So we're going to go to Boston. And for those of you who went to Boston, you get to see the Freedom Trail. Next slide. So here we have Cape Cod, and then Boston. Oh, yeah, look, Plymouth right here, Boston up there. Okay, next slide. By the way, if you go to Plymouth Plantation, you get to see where the Pilgrims lived, and you get to be on the Mayflower. So here we have Boston. This is Boston, and it's supposed to be something north of this, right, Willie? Something directly north. Okay, so now that's it, but it's probably that. Do we have another slide of Boston? Okay, so it looks like that. Now let's go back. Okay, so here we have Boston, and we're going to be covering the old Boston area, and I believe it's right here. Okay, and we're going to cross this bridge right there. Oh yeah, there's Charleston right there. Okay, so see that? That says does that say the North Church? Something of the North, right?
Island of the North, Boston.
I can't even see that word, but this is Charleston. What? Island of the North?
Yeah.
Okay, there we are. Very good. You guys have good vision. Okay, so we're going to be in Boston. Next slide. So if you ever go there, do the Freedom Trail, you walk from Boston Common, past Paul Revere's house, across the bridge to Bunker Hill. Okay, and here's the Freedom Trail. But if you want free parking, it's about $40 for 2 hours here, and it's free right there. So my recommendation is park here at Bunker Hill, and then across. Walk. You know, it says you can only park for 2 hours for free. How long did we park, Willie? 4 hours? No one gave us a ticket? Okay, so there, take your chances like us. Okay, next slide. So this is the Boston Massacre site in 1770. The people of Boston really didn't want to recognize King George III as their king, neither as the head of their church. And of course, the Boston Massacre site, the British soldiers shot the colonials, and many people died. Okay, the colonials were without weapons also. They were just standing there. So we have a corrupt king and with a corrupt empire, but the strongest empire in the world. The U.S. really had no weapons. So how do you fight a king with weapons? Okay, next slide. Oh yeah, by the way, when you go here, this is the old Boston State House. Okay, next slide. And also, the king imposed taxes. The stamp tax, every time you get something stamped, there's a tax. Every time you print, there's a tax. Every time you eat sugar, there's a tax. Every time you have. And then the British troops, the colonial have no weapons. Next slide. If you walk along the Freedom Trail, you see this. This is called Faneuil Hall. This is where John Adams, Hancock's, Samuel met here. And how do you overthrow the king? If you go here today, I think it's a shopping mall, food court. Okay, I actually got Indian food here. It was pretty good. What did you get, Willie? He got a lobster roll. That's Brits were coming. Silversmith, William Dawes, and there was a third writer. And I wrote down the name of the third writer, Sam Prescott. So what they had to do is they had to ride and warn everybody that the Brits were coming because all the ammunition was stored in Concord. Okay, next slide. So this is, when you walk the Freedom Trail, you can see Paul Revere's house. Okay, next slide. On this. If you want to know how to do the Freedom Trail, can you see this? This is made out of brick. You just follow that trail. Okay, you don't need Google Map to do this. Okay. Back then, when we went, really, did they even invent Google Map? Barely. Okay. I don't even think they invented the iPhone when we did this. Okay, next slide. But they did invent digital cameras because I used a digital camera for this. Next slide. This is the North Church. So they would climb to the top of the tower and send a message across the river to Paul Revere and Prescott. And so this is what it looks like from the top. So someone would climb up there, and the Brits were coming by land, so therefore it's going to be one lamp. Okay, next slide. So this is across the river from Charleston. You're going to see that one. Back then, this tree wasn't that big, okay? You're talking about 200 years ago, there was no tree here, so therefore you can see the lamp, and you'll see one lamp, and therefore, Paul Revere would start writing, telling everyone the Brits are coming. Next slide. So, oh yeah, here it looks better. Okay, so here's Boston. Here's the North Church. They send the message to this side, which is Bunker Hill, that the Brits are coming. And then they have to ride their horse all the way to Concord. Okay, very far away. Next slide. Bunker Hill looks like, so they're standing on Bunker Hill. They didn't have trees back then also. And they can see the North Church with the light. Next slide. Here's Paul Revere. He gets on his horse, starts riding really long distances all night long. You can't see this, but when you go to Boston, these trees weren't here, but right here you can see the North Church. So if you ever go to Boston during the winter, all the leaves will fall. You can see the North Church and the statue at the same time. Better picture, but who wants to go in the snow, right? Okay, next slide. So here's Boston, and here's Charlestown, and he has to ride his horse all the way up to Lexington, then all the way to Concord, okay? So he has to do this. So my question for you, Vincent, is why do they have 3 riders? You have Prescott and you have Dawes. Why do you need three riders riding from here all the way to there?
Because they need to refuel their energy.
Okay, why do you think they need 3, Chris?
Which is something like
How do you refuel if all 3 are riding at the same time? Okay. What do you think is the reason? There's 3 places? Okay. We'll discover the reason why you need 3 riders. Next slide. So if you go there today, there's this area between Lexington and Concord. You can stop and see what they did. Next slide. So this is in the middle of nowhere. This is why you need 3 riders. Paul Revere was arrested here. So therefore, if he's arrested, the message never makes it to Lexington, Concord, right? However, they all took different routes, and therefore Dawes and Prescott got by. So Paul Revere never made it. So if you walk here, you'll see a little plaque saying, this is where Paul Revere is arrested. The end, right? The end of the revolution. No, it wasn't. It continued. Okay. Next slide. So finally, you get to Lexington, and at Lexington, they weren't expecting a battle here, actually. The Brits made it to Lexington, and they saw the church. And if you go there today, there's this area called the Lexington Battlefield. So let's go to the next slide. So this is the battlefield. You can see the church again, right? They're still standing there today. Well, if you go on the right day, you see them maybe the 4th of July. Okay, so basically, the Americans weren't ready. The Brits had 1,800 soldiers, and the Americans only had I got it wrong. Lexington, the Americans had only 77 soldiers, and the Brits had 400. So who do you think should win this one?
obviously they got Americans.
Americans have 77, and the answer is the Brits won this one. Okay, come on, 477. What's the mathematical ratio? 1 to 6. Okay, here we go. So then they continued and marched on. So because they won, they continued, right? Okay, let's continue to Concord. Okay, and by the way, when you go there, there's a Minuteman statue next to the Greens. And next slide. And here we are. We're going to go to Concord. So they marched. There's the bathroom. Wanted to go. Hey, in Mandarin class today, I was asking the Bai brothers. They just went to China for 2 months, and I said, "Did you learn any Mandarin this month?" They said yes. I said, "Well, how do you say where's the bathroom?" And they had no idea. Okay, so you need to learn in all the languages. I was telling our good friend Matthew, I'm going to Tajikistan this month, and I have to learn in Russian how to say where's the bathroom. Okay, so that's really important. So here we go. So in case you, there it is. Next slide. So they actually have a visitor center. Hey, look at this, Willie. I never noticed that. Look at that. It says North Bridge.
Yes.
Yeah, we were saying, where is this museum located? It's the North Bridge. So here we are. Let's go into the museum and see what they have. Mel, can you move them to the front rows? Both of them to the front rows. Okay, somewhere in this area, right there or there. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's go into the museum, see if it's any good or whether it's a waste of time. Next slide. So they have, the best part is you get to stand next to these people and to see if you're taller, right? This is the Brits, and this is the Americans, and you're going to see a famous American here. Okay, next slide. There we are. So you get a chance to pick up the hat, wear it, stand there, get your picture taken, and only Melvin was brave enough to do this nonsense. But let's go to the next slide. So finally, you make it to the bridge. So the bridge, and who's on the other side of the bridge? The Brits. Okay, so it's beautiful today. And who won the battle? Okay, yeah. So I'm going to give you some numbers. Okay, Lexington conquered. Oh, so 400 Americans now, and 400 Brits. Okay, so remember I told you earlier it was 400 at Lexington against 77, and I guess none of the Brits died because, you know, it's 77. Now you have 400 against 400. So who do you think should win this one? So at Madison, 400 against 400. Who do you think should win? Americans. I gotta think on this one. Did the Americans win? Yes, they did. Now they started running backwards. Okay, so and then Minuteman picture here. Next slide. So this is what the bridge looks like. No one's going to cross it underneath. You either shoot on each side or you try to take over the bridge. The Brits started losing and they started running backwards. So my next slide is not running backwards, is it? Okay, so let's go to my next slide, which will be Lexington. You know, that green field with real Brits standing there.
Let's see. Oh, that will go back?
Yeah. Okay, so now the Brits are running backwards back to Lexington. And this time, the Brits got reinforcement. They're not 400 anymore. They are 1,800. Okay? And the Americans got more too. They have 4,000. Okay, so let's get this one right. Vince, who do you think will win? The Americans with 4,000 or the Brits with 1,800? What? The Americans, of course, 4,000. So what happened was Paul Revere and Dawes and Prescott continued to find more and more volunteers. So, of course, the Brits lost. Now they're running as fast as they can back to Boston where there's protection. So let's go back to that slide. Yeah, very good. Now they run back and they're hiding at the only place that they can hide at, Bunker Hill. Okay, if you go there today, they built that obelisk. And at Bunker Hill, they reinforced and they had cannons on the top. Okay, so who do you think will win this battle? Brits with cannons or Americans with rifles? Okay, what do you think, Chris? How many what? Rifles or cannons? Well, okay. It's 2,000 Brits against 1,000 Americans with rifles. 2,000 Brits with cannons. Yeah, the Brits won. So the Brits won. I think out of the 1,000 Americans, 500 got killed. And then they said, we quit. Okay, Brits, you can have this Bunker Hill. So then a couple days later, they talked to this genius. So let's look at the next slide. Okay, but wait, yeah. So when you go here, you can see Bunker Hill, and then they talk to this genius. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to ask people in the audience who they think this genius is. Okay. So Eric, who's that genius on the horse? Yeah, very good. It's actually George Washington. George Washington wasn't at the original battles of Lexington and Concord, but they said to George Washington, look, we got Brits on Bunker Hill. We got no cannons. How do we win this battle? So George Washington is a genius. What I do is I'm going to ask you guys will be George Washington. How do we get the Brits out of Boston? In fact, I'm going to ask college. Okay. So, let's see, where is okay, Brendan, you want to get the Brits out of Boston? You got no cannon. George Washington. Tell men to run up the hill anyway and run into the cannon. Okay, so this is what he did. Don't worry, you'll get the next question. George Washington says, it's a little bit obvious we need cannons, right? So the question is, so they said, but George Washington, we have no cannons. And this is what George Washington said. We have no cannons, but they got cannons. So all we have to do is take over some cannons from the Brits. Next slide. So you see this fort right here, Fort Ticonderoga. There's a British fort right there. If we go at night, if we invade this, we get their cannons. So he sent two famous people, one named after you, and one named after, well, I can't say me, but so he sent Benedict Arnold and Ethan Allen to take over Fort Ticonderoga, and they took them by surprise. No one thought the Americans would walk that far. They took over the fort in the name of God, and they got it. And did you know that they had 50 cannons there? So it took them time to bring 50 cannons all the way down from New York, all the way through Vermont, Massachusetts, all the way to Boston. My next question is, you're George Washington. You got 50 cannons now. Where do you put the cannons? At the bottom of the hill? And there on the top of the hill? Yeah? On the what? On the what? On a building. So they'll blow up the building, your cannons fall, right? Where will you put the cannons? What? Another. This guy's Washington and Ethan Allen. Next slide. So you got your 50 cannons, right? Put it on another hill. Next slide. This is where Bunker Hill is. You see that? Okay. So he puts it on another hill. He puts it out of range. He puts it right there. So how does that win the battle? Watch this. George Washington doesn't point his cannons this way. He points them this way. This is where the British ships were. And one by one, all the Brits had to leave, including them, because their ships would be blown out of the water. There's no supplies, no weapons, no food. The Brits left Boston, and George Washington, the genius, had a bloodless victory. So we're not going to talk about the whole war. That was the first battle that George Washington won. The next battle will be New York, and we'll cover that another day. So I'm going to just end off with this. If the Brits won today, then today America would not be worshiping God. And you and I would not be saved today, because we believe Christ is the head of our church, King Charles, the adulterer, and his brother. So America does have a role. Because England dominated the world, at least the world, it's about 100 countries speak English. And God's plan was for America to send missionaries in those 100 countries that speak English, because we speak English also. So we have to hold up the light before the world. So we're grateful that God had a plan that we needed to win this war. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Dear God, we want to thank you for the 4th of July. It's a celebration that with your providence, that we can worship God without England telling us what to do, and that we have a big missionary responsibility to win our own people and also to send missionaries throughout. We want to thank you in Jesus' name, amen. Okay, I got one last song. It is God Bless America. It's going to be up here. And I wrote God Bless America, all 50 states, but since I know no one wants to sing my all 50 states, we'll just sing God Bless America. You know, my song, I have every state in the song. Can someone turn on the backlights? Okay, can you still see this? Okay, so does Brendan need the little light?
That's good.
Okay. Okay, so he's going to give us an intro. We're going to sing according to the... Okay, ready? God bless America, land that I love, and desire, and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans, I belong. God bless America, my home sweet home. God bless America, my home sweet home. Okay, can someone turn on all the lights? Okay, so I'm going to dismiss you in different groups. If you're part of Chinese school, teacher or student, you guys are welcome to join us for the lunch on the other side. Just hang out. I think it'll start at, in theory, somewhere slightly before 12 noon. Depends on how slow Benny is or how quick Benny is. So, so if you're part of Chinese school, after Chinese school, you're welcome to come down there, and you guys are now dismissed. And Eric, can you turn the blinds? Thank you. Eric,